Uh, so I have to say very carefully about the tax, and of course, for example, the Japanese and the European the system tax. These areas are well-developed countries, and actually, so the government need the tax for social cost increasing. But okay, so therefore, of course, we select the, our business place according to the tax differences. This is a natural way, but I'm a little bit afraid about new system or new discussion about transparency system for the companies. Now, maybe this is a hot issue. Okay, the last European Council and now coming the G8. This is a very important issue for tax and transparency, especially for companies. And of course, so we should we should follow this discussion, and we'd like to watch very carefully about the movement. Thank you.
Thank you for the comments. Let me open the discussion to the audience. We've got two roving mics, I believe. Where are the hostesses with the mics? If you happen to be at a table with a mic, the way you get my attention is to raise your hand. Let me see if there are questions in the audience. Here we go. Let's start here. Thank you. Could you just introduce yourself and who you represent?
Yeah, Andrea, founder of Think Young. We are a think tank which does studies for young people and lobbies for the presence of young people in the political debate. We actually want to bring a bit of a positive message. We started in 2007, so right the year before the crisis, and it was just 3 of us with a laptop, and now we are 12. We have offices in Brussels and Geneva. We are soon opening in Hong Kong. So there are actually, even in Europe, success cases. Even if I look at this very conference, I remember 3 years ago I was the only one and probably the youngest. And now after 3 years, we managed to bring around 15 people of our team here. I'm definitely not the youngest anymore in the crowd. So that's, I mean, there are some positive news in Europe as well. I consider myself not only someone who studies young people, but also a startupper or an entrepreneur. And there are a couple of things that I would like to say about what you said, and somehow I agree. One is the mobility. Very important. A lot of young people want to travel, but then I would like to ask to the European Parliament or the European Commission why they're cutting the budget for the Erasmus. It's a bit of a contradict. As long as I also like to come up with ideas or solutions, not only to criticize. Maybe companies that are mainly represented here, they could get involved in some mobility program. Now there is one called Erasmus for All. Why don't companies join the cause and put some budget to finance the Erasmus for All, for example? The second thing about entrepreneurship, I agree with what Dirk said on 90% of what you said. Just one I don't agree with you is when you said that a lot of young people, they want to work for state or public institution. That's not true at all, or at least the one who want to create their company, they emigrate to the US or China, not mainly because of capital. If you have a good idea and a good company, capital is coming. We know of startup based in Budapest, and venture capitalists from San Francisco, they fly there to invest because the idea is very good. So the capital look for idea. The problem in Europe is what we have since 20 years and we don't manage to solve, the lack of a single market. And again, what the hell are we waiting for? And the second thing is something actually we're going to work on a lot next year, and we thank the companies that are going to support us in that, is the attitude towards failure. In the US, if you fail, you get a job at Apple or Google. In Europe, if you fail, you're doomed forever. Maybe, again, here an idea for companies, you should implement a program within your human resource or recruiting policies that you focus your hiring for entrepreneurs in their 30s who created a company, was well for a good time, and then it went bad. I'm somehow trying to put an insurance on my life as well. And just these two things to put a debate on the table. But really, don't focus mainly on capital. Capital follow good ideas and is looking for good ideas. It's just the cultural background in Europe needs to be changed. And we somehow did our part in the last 5 years, and we hope to do the same in the next 5. Thanks, Bob.
Thanks. Dirk, do you want to answer the question on Erasmus, and at least what is the prospect of that funding going forward?
Well, thanks a lot. I fully agree what you have been saying. I think it's mainly about changing the mindset of lots of people. When I talked about the ambition of becoming a state official, this was a question put to young people in Belgium. I didn't say it was in the whole of Europe. Yeah, Erasmus is a very important program. I hope that it can be increased to make the budget of the EU more flexible. We have a sort of a flexibility rule for the years to come, so that not everything which is on the budget line has to be spent on that particular budget line. It can be transferred to other budget lines. I think that will be very important. I think Erasmus is better to be funded than to build bridges to nowhere. The mistake we have made over the past 20 years is to believe that the more concrete you flow out over a country, the faster it will grow. In Spain there are many regional airports, and I think 37 and about 11 of them only are profitable. So we have made those mistakes, thinking that when you build bridges and airports, etc., then there is growth. You're right that you need capital. I refer to the position of the banks. They are just saving money by themselves, or even give it in as a deposit back to the ECB, the money they have. So the money is not circulating, and you need venture capital to get at the ideas. But it's obvious that it is one of the big problems is access to capital for many companies. And about the social stigma, you're absolutely right. It's also something we have to change in our mindset. If you start up a business, I always said that if Bill Gates had been born in Europe, he would be now on social allowances because he set up a business and he failed the first time. Second time around, he knew how to do it and he was successful. But in Europe, if you fail the first time, then you're out because you are a loser. And everybody starts laughing and ridiculizing you. So it's absolutely the wrong mindset, and I hope also that in the young generation, that social stigma will disappear.
Another question from the audience, please. Yeah, in the back. Sure.
Thank you. My name is Kurt Engelen from the Euro-Atlantic Association of Belgium. I would like to make a comment about the mobility. We have a tendency to forget the psychological impact of mobility here. And 20 years ago, or 25 years ago, it was quite interesting to be invited by your company to go to work in another country, because generally the advantages that you would get, both in terms of experience and also in terms of working conditions, were very attractive. Expats was really something that people were being an expat was really something that people were looking forward to. Today this is no longer the case, because I see a lot of very promising young people, and whenever they are given the opportunity to travel or to work abroad, actually in a lot of cases they're worse off in terms of financial conditions, because they have to change for a local contract, they have to provide for themselves for housing where they're going, they cannot take their family with them, and it makes it lots more unattractive. Well, I'm not speaking about the top 2% of the big companies. I'm talking about maybe the 30 or 50% of intermediate higher employees in companies. And another mistake is to believe that the industry is going to change the social values. This is simply not going to work. You are not going to tell young people how they should live. This is a trend. Young people have a different kind of life. For them, it is no longer like that 90% of their life is their job. And in the past, it's always the social values that changed the industry, never the other way around. So these are things that we should take into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions we've got in the audience? No other questions. Let me raise one final question before we go around to the roundtable. Mark, I'm actually going to address this to you, and then I'd like the panelists to give their opinion. Every year, the Attractiveness Survey rates different countries 1 through 15 or 20. That kind of competitive ranking is between member states of Europe, and yet Europe is trying to attract investment. How do you balance this notion of internal competitiveness with the notion that Europe wants investment wherever it comes?
Good question. That's always how you should start. What I've tried to show this morning fairly quickly is that the competition between countries, the diversity of situations it's like a big store. Actually, it's a bigger store than the one you just rephrased, Bob. It's not the European Union. It's 40 plus countries. Along the years, and I'm sure all of you and most of you have this experience, Europe has extended, moved, changed to go beyond the administrative frontiers, beyond the Eurozone, beyond the European Union. So this is like a big store where, in our experience, and the team I live with every day, who do work on site selection, deciding where to locate, where to restructure, where to close, where to reopen or grow, have a feeling, after saying, to my mind, a bit too quickly that we need to harmonize, we need to equalize. Of course, we should avoid dispersion, but there is a difference between dispersion and diversity. And I think the diversity of situations, opportunities, and countries, to answer your question, is one of the big differentiators of Europe. It's one of its unique selling propositions. What we see then is that when countries compete against each other, and there are fierce competitions among several groups of several countries. I quickly went over the competition at the top, what we call the big three, because their market share of foreign direct investment is almost equal every year, 46, 47, 48%. So there is a market share game, competition between the UK, Germany, and France. And each is looking at the other and is copying the other. The tax incentive, the research tax incentive that did well for France a few years ago is now copied, and it's good. It's making Spain move forward again. It's put Belgium also up in the R&D rankings, etc. So this competition among groups of countries, we could tell you about competition in the Nordics, competition in the Benelux, in Central Europe, in Southeast Europe, etc., etc. And this, to me, Bob, is one of the great lessons that we should, of course, we should stick together, but not forget that the variety of situations is also a big, big, big plus for Europe.
Thanks, Mark. That is a good segue for my next question for the panel, which is, let's stick together. Is Europe still relevant? The big debate that's raging at the moment in at least part of Europe is, should the UK Stay in, stay out, keep a little bit in, keep a little bit out. Jim?
Easy question. Well, I'm in Scotland, and I guess we have to solve that one first, whether they're going to stay in or out. But I think that if you believe in the vision of the European Union, I think if you believe in what should be the strength of it, then the objective should be to stay in. As soon as any country, in my opinion, any fraction starts to back up, I think the strength of it continues to come into question. I think the question that I've been in Europe now for 11 years, and I guess for the last 4 or 5, it continues to be one of the discussion points that's had. I just happen to think that's a bit of a negative side to it, and I believe that for the European Union to be successful, they should focus on what it can do, the positives of going forward, and probably a little bit less on breaking it up or basically pulling out of something that, in my mind, can be and really is the strength of the whole vision of the European Union. So I'm hopeful that the UK stays in, and I'm hopeful that the sum of the parts here is greater when it's put together in the years to come, because that really is a competitive advantage. And I'm sure in closing comments I can make 1 or 2 more points, but that's what I see from a UK perspective.
Thanks, Jim. Takahiro, UK, in, out, what do you think is going to happen?
Actually, our headquarters of EMEA is located in London. It's a very important place, and I think this is my personal comment. So UK is a very, very important role for EU. Sometimes very practical, how to say, idea. So for Japanese, so I feel that so UK's some function or role is very, very important, or how to say, sometimes the continental side, they are very conservative or very, very, how to say, one side thing. But from UK point of view, they give a counter idea to the EU some political movement, and I think this is a very, very necessity of the function, and UK's position is very important for EU. Therefore, so I hope UK stay in EU.
Thank you. Dirk, is this a real debate that's going on, or is this just a media story?
Well, actually, I'm vice president of the group of European conservatives and reformists, and 50% of the group consists of Tories. So I'm well aware of the problem. And often when the Tories go home, they ask me to come with them as a non-Brit to say something nice about the European Union, which I then try to do. But you can imagine what a frosty wind there is in the country. The political elites are in favor of the UK staying in the EU. I'm too, obviously. And the entire establishment actually is. But the man in the street, I'm just worrying about. Because what the man in the street in the UK has seen, they say, well, they've always been, never been really in love with the EU as such. And then they have seen the Euro crisis. So I remember the annual party conference of the Conservatives a couple of years ago, and William Hague coming to the fore and saying, we were right every word of the argument. He didn't mention the Euro, but he got a huge applause because everyone knew what it was about. And they have the impression that they were right and we were wrong. The more problems there are for all sorts of reasons, or immigration or whatever, is now piling up. And I think it's going to be very hard to stop that trend or to reverse it. So in 2014, next year, we're going to have European elections. I'm fearing that UKIP will be the big winner of these elections and the Tories will be the big losers of it. And then in September there will be the referendum in Scotland on independence. Now this European election, the victory of UKIP, of course, will have a psychological impact on how the Scots will vote. It may well be possible that the English indicate we want to leave the EU, and then the Scots will say, well, if you want to leave the EU, we're going to leave the UK in order to stay in the EU. So all sorts of things may happen, things that we didn't think about a few years ago. But it would be very bad for the UK, it would be very bad for the EU, and small free market countries like the Netherlands and countries in Scandinavia would lose an important ally, and economic liberalism would be marginalized if the UK were to leave the EU.
Thierry?
Certainly, I will love the UK stay in the EU. Of course, I think as you said, I see a lot of benefits, a lot of diversity. I think diversity is a chance as well, as long as we can manage in a European zone here and taking benefits of each other, rather than being too much competing here. It's difficult, but that's true. I think we look at citizens in the street. Yes, at the end, they will vote in few years and decide to some extent. And in the UK, maybe some other countries as well, I'm not sure a yes will win. It's a big concern, and certainly a big concern for the EU Commission as well. How at the end to make sure that the citizens see more benefits staying in the EU than being out. It's a challenge for all of us, and not only for the European Commission, of course.
I must confess I don't really have an opinion on that, but clearly there is a benefit, economical benefit that the UK stays in. It's quite clear.
Great. We've got about 7 minutes before closing. I'll ask each of the panelists now to make some final remarks, but please address the following question in your following remarks. I think it's probably fair to say that for all of you, Europe is relevant from the corporate point of view, but I'd like you to answer the following question. If Europe was to do one thing in the next 12 months, what would you like to see implemented in Europe in the next 12 months? So please give me your final comments, but make sure you answer that question, because tomorrow morning when we're in front of the Bureau of Economic Policy Advisors of the Commission, I want to be absolutely clear what needs to happen in 12 months. So Jim, over to you for final comments.
Okay, thanks, Bob. So that really kind of feeds into what I wanted to say anyway. You know, I've been here in Europe, living in Europe as an expat for 11 years. Been the highlight of my 27-year career at UPS. But in the last 2 weeks, quite frankly, I've been to Panama, Costa Rica, China, Vietnam, and each of them, in my opinion, have their own individual strengths they're trying to win with in this globalized world. And the question is now for Europe, where does Europe now go? And it goes to the question you just asked is, I think Europe has to focus on one or two things and start to win with them. And those being the things that take to the EU, that the man in the street or the lady in the street can be glad they're part of the EU. I personally believe right now the one thing that it should focus on is TTIP, as I said in the opening comments. I think it is something that the time is right. I think it has benefits for parties around the world, and it would be a great step for Europe to take, but I think it also is it's obligatory that, back to some of the comments we've had here as a group, that the European Union citizen has to be able to stand behind it and say yes to it, and not certain segments of society. But I believe TTIP can provide that to the man in the street and the lady in the street in the EU, but it has to be led from the leaders, and they have to take some aggressive moves here over the next couple of months to stand behind it. But I think it's the one thing that they should focus on right now, Bob.
Thank you, Jim. Takahiro, one thing?
Okay, next 12 months. So just one important point from okay, Japanese side is now the negotiation between EU and Japan for FTA has started, and it's a very tough negotiation. But the first year, that means okay, April started, and next year March maybe. So we together should have good conclusion, and maybe okay, Japanese government, of course, and Japanese industry side, we have to concentrate to back up this negotiation.
Dirk?
When you talk to EPC tomorrow, an institution I'm familiar with, I would suggest them that they have to put competitiveness more on top in the policy mix. Just to give you an example, Europe now threatens to, or could possibly miss the shale gas revolution. We have a mix of energy policy, climate policy, and a sort of a competitiveness down the line. And we've put lots of resources on renewables, windmills, very expensive. We have an overambitious climate policy. And as a result, electricity price is the double of the price in the US. And if you look at energy-intensive industry in Europe, I'm elected in Flanders. Antwerp is, after Houston, the biggest chemical sector in the world. If you add to it the chemical industry in Holland, is by far the biggest. Now, these industries cannot survive if they're not competitive. And when energy prices just go up as the way they do, and we missed the shale gas revolution because it is forbidden in France. That's the only reason the revolution is forbidden in France, and generally they are forbidden in Germany, by the way. But this one, I think, should be a revolution France shouldn't miss. And I think that as a result, there's a conclusion of the proper policy mix, and competitiveness should go up, and that will have consequences for the others. And for some industries like the chemical industry, it's death or life. So it's to stay or to go, and we want them to stay.
Thierry?
Yeah, I would put up competitiveness as one of the key elements to put up on the agenda. European Commission is for all our business and business leaders here to help us to continue to invest and develop in Europe, creating value, creating jobs at the end. This is really the driver. In 12 months, it's challenge gets to deliver some things. Energy cost is a big driver for many industries. Particularly in some industries, are critical as well, and making choice. Fiscal, harmonization of fiscal policies across Europe, and stability, having a vision. Worst case is putting a business plan for 20 years and having what do you put on taxes here. It's difficult projects. And labor flexibility, if you had another thing, which is a key element as well to help us to drive basically competitiveness as well.
I fully agree. I think the number one issue is competitivity, because there is no sustainable growth if you don't have competitive environment. So at the same time, I'm not sure that shale gas is the solution for it, but that's another issue, because I think there is a lot of evolution in the energy industry which will enable to produce and transport energy today at a much lower cost than existed historically, which are things we are working on. So, but to me, competitivity, including flexibility of labor, is a key element for the future of Europe.
Pascal, final comments from you?
Yeah, my takeaway from the discussion today, that what we discussed a lot on mobility, and I think it's a very important element. It's not only a matter of regulation, it's a matter also of changing the DNA, cultural shift. It's a big strength in the US, it's a big strength in Asia, it's still a weakness in Europe. So we need to act in that domain and create a move in Europe. The second point we did not discuss too much during this panel, but which is important in my view in the survey we made, is around made in Europe, market the made in Europe. A good marketing on that branding would be appropriate. That's something which is probably missing, and a big surprise for me from the survey, how optimistic we are in that regard. And maybe to conclude and to come back on the key driver, which will be competitiveness, certainly, I would insist on innovation, create in Europe, support innovation. We were discussing the need to support SMEs. I think it's a critical challenge for EU, and if I would have a request for the next 12 months, I would focus on creating in Europe and helping the SMEs to develop their business outside Europe.
Pascal, thank you for chairing this session. Mark and Ernst & Young, thank you very much for presenting at this year's conference, the attractiveness study. All of you should have a copy of it in your folders. It provides a great context for the discussion this morning and certainly the discussion later today and in the afternoon. Panelists, thank you very much for your participation and your comments. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a 10-minute coffee break. Please be back here at 11:30 promptly because we're going live to our virtual town hall across Europe. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Please take your seats, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to begin. We're going to begin with London. London is ready to go.
Brussels, can you hear me?
London, give us one more minute, please, while everybody here in Brussels takes a seat. Thank you, everyone. Good morning again. Thank you for panel number 2 is about to begin. We, as you saw this morning, we started out using a new technology that's just been released by Microsoft. It's called Link in the Cloud 2013. And we can connect, obviously, via IP as we have many different locations in HD. Most of these locations are using simple laptop cameras. And everyone who is on this link conversation hears what's going on here in Brussels. And we've asked everybody to be on mute in the various locations as we go forward. What I'm going to be asking at the moment is that the chairperson in each location present a brief summary of the discussion that they had, and then I will be asking the other 4 countries to give their opinion and viewpoint on what they heard from each of their colleagues. We've got Hugh Millward in the UK, who's Director of UK Corporate Affairs. And Hugh, I'm going to turn it over to you to summarize the discussion in your workshop. Thanks, Hugh.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Okay, so just in brief, the UK, here we had an extremely valuable discussion about financial services and business services in the UK and at a European level. In summary, 5 points that we wanted to share with you. The first being that the UK wants and needs to sustain a strong financial services sector. It's still a very powerful economic driver for the UK, and importantly for the EU as well. The second point is that there needs to be less reliant, the UK in particular needs to be less reliant on financial services and on London. So, bringing in alternatives, the point 3 is that the UK does need to focus on how it brings and stimulates new alternatives to financial services. Selling opportunities offered in the regions of the UK, where we see particular strengths in Scotland and in Wales, and we need to replicate those strengths in the regions of England and continue to shore those up in the regions of the UK. And B, to support growth in other economic sectors as well as financial services, including through, for example, the development of industrial strategies, specific focus on the skills and development of other industry sectors. Point 4 is that we need to continue to focus, maintain a focus on infrastructure to support these alternatives. We need to maintain a liberalised labour market, which is working currently for the UK, keeping workers engaged and content, and keeping businesses attracted to the UK. B, we need to continue to maintain a reduction of red tape and maintain a light regulatory burden. And C, to continue or increase investment in the core infrastructure that supports the UK, such as transit and transport, education and skills, and important for that is transport hubs such as airports. Point 5 is that from a European perspective, or looking beyond the UK, there is a creeping and unwelcome moral dimension that's applied to financial services and to financial services regulation, such as in the capping of salaries, which is potentially damaging to the sector and unintentionally to other sectors as well. And B, we wanted to make the point that Europe's banking sector is not healthy, and that regulation really needs to continue to focus on fixing the unhealthiness in the financial sector rather than restricting its capacity for growth. So that's the feedback from the UK.
Thank you. One of the questions you raise is alternatives to just financial services sector. Did you discuss what other services that might be further developed in the UK?
Yes, we did. We particularly felt that there were some strengths to be learnt from Germany and a number of other European countries in the development of or support for clean tech, for ICT, for energy, and for continued support for growth in media and information economy.
Paris, are you online? And if you are you jealous of this financial services position for the UK? They lost it after 2009. Both Paris and Frankfurt tried to become the next financial services center. Let me ask Paris, what do you think of this desire by the UK to continue? Paris is not there. No, I don't need the. I know
that some of my colleagues want to have a largest market regarding finance in France, because we have the privilege of old relationships with our friends of Maghreb, and in France, in our EY organization, Maghreb is part of France and Luxembourg area that Jean-Pierre Letard is driving. No, we focused a lot of our time with this outstanding panel and the key issue around innovation. And because we are in France, we speak a little bit on France to expand the different experience we can observe at the EU level. And first of all, we observe the lack of attractiveness for France and the difficulty with perception, certainly, especially vis-à-vis of BRICS. And we were very lucky because with this outstanding panel, we have the CEO of Wipro, the Indian consultancy service firm, and we have the CEO, the European CEO of Embraer, the Brazilian company, very successful in airline. And we observe that the perception, and especially for France, the complexity was certainly a barrier for investment. And there is a question of marketing to develop this image vis-à-vis of Europe and certainly vis-à-vis of BRICS. The second point was addressed by the panel was the perception we could have around the made in France and the made by France, and the question could be the same for Europe, and to know how we could capitalize on the attractiveness we have with Europe to promote a label made by Europe around the world. Next point, and it's a point we want to share with all of our colleagues around Europe, was a question around labor costs and the discussion around flexibility and regulatory uncertainty. It's around labor, it's around tax, and the idea, and especially with the representative of the French government, Mr. Martinez, was that certainly a common line between Germany and France for the future could create a sort of alignment of labor law, labor costs, and perhaps tax rules around Europe, and for the development of innovation and the different consistency of the framework around innovation we could have at EU level. It's necessary to have a common language and common policy between France and Germany. And last but not the least, with the CEO of Toulouse Métropole, we have the demonstration of the key success factor for a cluster, with a close relationship between university, between public funding, between private funding, private companies. We have the opportunity to develop infrastructure at the regional level. And the key question, and it's a question for EU strategy, is how we can identify key sectors for the future, key ideas for the future, and how we can drill down this need of success for the future, and especially at the regional level. For our colleagues in Germany or people in India or in Brazil, the regional aspect is not a real difference. For France, which is a little bit centralized perhaps, the emphasis on this point is very important, but the implementation of those different programs are certainly key for the future. So at the end of this panel and the different discussion we had, we could share certainly 4 key recommendations around innovation for European nation as a key success factor for the future. The first point could be to adapt the idea we had in France with the French Grand Emprunt, to have a sort of EU strategic law which could identify the key projects and the key sectors and the key area of investment for the future for innovation. And this could be a unique opportunity for a dialogue between the different countries, EU countries, to decide their future and to establish a consensus which combine founding and region of implementation. The second one is a certain need to reinforce the quality and the discussion between strategic cluster. We know in France we have a 80 cluster, and certainly 10 or less are strategical, but they still need a dialogue, a regular dialogue with the other cluster in Munich, in Zurich, in Stockholm. So a strong network to help this cluster to benchmark, to share best ideas, to create network between universities, and perhaps to have only one gate, perhaps to serve as a one-stop shop for grants, incentives, and tax advantages. The next point could be to create a EU framework or a EU vehicle, which could be a vehicle to embark professors, students, listed companies, universities, public sectors, because today there is a huge problem to manage IP revenue for a university or public entity versus individual, entrepreneurial, and versus listed company. And last but not the least, to found all those elements, and especially to help small companies or small entrepreneurs, it could be a good idea to promote a Small Business Act at the EU level to be sure that small companies could have more quickly benefits of funding to give them a minimum of money and visibility for their cash to their fantastic idea and promote innovation at the EU level. It was a summary of this strong discussion we had in Paris with a great panel and with 100 people around us. And we feel that the time was short for the discussion and that we will come back very quickly to address more and more recommendations in the future. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Paris. Let's move to Milan. Can we have a summary of the discussion in Milan?
Hello?
We hear you.
From Bruxelles, can you hear us?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Can we start?
Please.
Okay.
So, good morning. Here in Milano, we had a group of 15 people. We had a quite lively discussion around the theme of maintaining creativity edge for Italy. And first of all, we would like to clarify that for Italy, creativity doesn't mean only the classical, let's say, design or the classical fashion, which, by the way, is creating a lot of business. Just as a best practice, Milano is definitely a center for Europe, and not only for Europe, for design. And we have more than 1,000 companies working around this system in Milano. But this is not only design, with everything related, being fashion, being furniture, but we have also creativity, means also creativity in precision mechanics, which is also another area which is significantly contributing to the export of the country. So we would like to think to creativity from a broader edge and from a broader point of view. Creativity is coming basically, and why Italy has this competitive edge is mainly due to our heritage, to our broad, let's say, long history and historical heritage. And so this cultural background is the cornerstone of the creativity and, let's say, the basis of this advantage for Italy. What are the elements that we would like to focus the attention and where we should, let's say, put effort in order to improve and even increase what is our position and have even more investment from abroad in our country, is basically based around the people. Because when we talk about creativity, we talk about people, so human being and human capital is the number one element. On this respect, the continuous learning and, let's say, the education should be an area of paramount importance. Here, the connection, or a better, stronger, more efficient connection between university and companies, and is an element that needs to be improved. Another element is the continuous learning, not only for young people, but for people of older age. And focus always on diversity and attracting people to our, let's say, center of excellence for design and creativity, coming also from other countries. So the creativity could be made in Italy, but also having people coming from other parts of the world. From this respect, I think it's also important the focus on young people, because they represent definitely an asset in terms of creativity, in terms of risk-taking, and the fact that the youth unemployment is very high, especially here in Italy, for people below 30 years age, is really a problem. First of all, because they are out of the business, and furthermore, we lose a tremendous asset in terms of competence, in terms of creativity, in terms of energy that we cannot afford to lose. So focus on youth unemployment and education is important. Then when we talk about creativity, and is also a matter of quality, we cannot believe that we can compete and attract investment only if we produce low cost and low quality product, but high quality is an element of differentiation, and therefore in order to protect the high quality we need also a stronger IP patents legislation, protection on trademarks. This doesn't mean that we want to build protectionism or build walls, but ensure that the end user are getting what they are expecting for, and where we see made in Italy, there is really made in Italy on the product that they are buying. Last but not least, I will say that the root of this innovation and creativity is based on small companies, small, medium companies, and as it has been said by my colleagues before, make life easier for this small, medium company from an administrative point of view is crucial. This doesn't mean support only in terms of money, finance, but is making the, let's say, the administrative burden lower, help the startup companies make the access to venture capital easier, especially for the small and medium companies, but not only for them. Then also the enforcement of the legislation, make legislation respected and respecting the rules, and on the respect also the payment terms, especially by public authorities, is something that needs to be improved, because right now it's definitely one of the major obstacles to the development of the economy for large and small companies. Then we move also to infrastructure. If infrastructure has been mentioned by our colleagues in the other countries, I think is even of a greater importance here in Italy. When we talk about infrastructure, we refer to telecommunication, broadband, which is not yet available all over the country at the same quality, transportation, and everything related to, let's say, infrastructure that can improve the attractiveness of Italy. Then, in general terms, we believe, and there were a kind of common consensus on this, is that we should improve also the communication on what is working well in the country, and communicate, let's say, what is the advantage of producing and what is the quality of what has been made in Italy and created in Italy. And this communication is not good enough. It's not good enough even within Europe, but definitely outside Europe. And we think that the Expo 2015 that will take place in Milano should be an ideal, let's say, arena where we can, let's say, work on improving the communication. Then we close with some general remarks related to not only to Italy but to Europe, saying that we firmly believe that Europe is more than the sum of the single part, because it's definitely a unique area in terms of mix of culture, resources, and it's not a coincidence that the world is still looking very interesting to Europe. And of course, economic and political stability is an element of attraction, and is specifically valid, of course, for Italy. as of economic and political stability is one of the major obstacles to the people from abroad investing in Italy, but even for Italians to believe in the development of our economy. That's all from our side.
Thank you, Milan. Let's move to Poland and in Warsaw. Warsaw, please come off mute.
We're okay?
You're great.
Very good. So welcome on a cloudy afternoon from Warsaw, Poland, from Procter & Gamble Central Europe offices. We had the privilege of hosting a multi-stakeholder discussion on the logistics of and efficiency of logistics within Poland and the EU as a whole in order to facilitate attractiveness, growth, and sustainability. At Procter & Gamble, we are committed to optimizing our logistics operations in order to control costs and to reduce their environmental impact as part of our sustainability vision. For example, we have an active program to develop intermodal routes in Europe. Also, 30% of our shipments measured as tons per kilometers now go via rail. We have achieved this without impact on price or service quality and without subsidy. We're also committed to Poland as a manufacturing base with production facilities for Pampers here in Warsaw, next to our offices here, Gillette in Łódź and Olay in Aleksandrów, hence our choice of the topic and the venue. Poland is a gateway at the border of the EU with the Eastern markets. Like many others, we believe that Poland has a great potential. This is reflected in 2013 Ernst & Young's attractiveness survey. Within the EU, Poland was the only second to UK in jobs created by foreign direct investments, but there's still room for improvement. The Polish rail network is the EU's third largest. However, problems with performance mean it is a significant barrier for attracting new investments. Let me now pass on to my colleague Roger Sprague, who will now provide further details of what we've discussed.
Thank you, Marek. This morning, 22 stakeholders here in Poland discussed several issues. They included, number one, problems with customs on the eastern border of the EU. Number two, the need to improve the quality and utilization of Polish road and rail infrastructure. Number three, to promote better intermodal cooperation. Number four, the overall low efficiency of the road haulage network. Number five, the importance of pending proposal to better harmonize vehicle weights and dimensions. And then number six, security. Last week, the European Commission published its recommendations to each member state on reforms necessary to realize the Europe 2020 growth goals. For Poland, there was an explicit observation that underdeveloped infrastructure, particularly in the rail network, is a bottleneck to growth. Poland has to clearly overcome this barrier in order to compete in the European markets. Rail access charges in Poland are relatively high. More competitive charges and improvements to reliability would greatly aid the uptake of international or intermodal transport in Poland. As regards the EU as a whole, we identified various problems. One striking example is the overall inefficiency of the road transportation network. Eurostat estimates that 24% of good vehicles in the EU 27 run empty, and an average loading on the remainder is 57%. So this means the overall efficiency is only 43%. The total cost burden of road freight inefficiency in the EU is estimated at 160 billion euros. Capital investments in infrastructure do not address the question or efficiency of the current transportation system. Indeed, the large proportion of planned future investments will be wasted if this problem of efficiency is not addressed. More efficient use of vehicles and loading can all help. This means better vehicle fill and horizontal collaboration among shippers. And number three, changes to current restrictions on vehicle weights and dimensions. For example, to allow the use of 45-foot containers. The efficiency of all modes of transports need to be improved. Even if the EU meets its target of 30% by rail in 2030, most of the remainder will still go by road. To resist the improvement in efficiency of road transport through fear of reverse modal shift is fundamentally mistaken. We clearly need a mindset shift to improve the efficiency and carbon intensity of logistics. The potential financial sustainability benefits are massive. All businesses and experts present today in Warsaw session believe that targeted actions can improve measurable and visible results for our business and for society. We will be more than happy to share these recommendations in detail after today. I'd also like to extend my thanks to those who joined here today in Warsaw for your insightful comments and your commitment to a shared common vision of a better environment for all of us. And we talked about the role of logistics in the development of sustainability within Europe. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Warsaw. We'll come back to some questions in a minute. Let's finally move to Frankfurt. We might only hear Frankfurt audio at this point. Frankfurt, can you hear me?
Yes, Bob. Yes, Mark.
Okay, Martin, just go ahead.
Okay, hi, Bob. It's my honor here to summarize the discussion of the German team in Frankfurt. We are sitting here in the G headquarters in the banking quarter of Frankfurt. But however, I will not summarize, will not talk about, and we did not talk about financial services. We talk about Germany. It's the model for export competitiveness. Can it be exported itself? And let me summarize it in 3 key points. First point, Mittelstand. I will translate it in SME, medium-sized company, very important stakeholder in the German economy. It's a driving force of the German economy for generations. It's unique that Mittelstand companies internally seek social alignment very early, very inclusive, but globally, externally, they're very competitive, and especially in the emerging markets. The Mittelstand sector also drives innovation and escapes by this, the so-called commoditization trap. Okay, ongoing innovation is really the key for the success of the Mittelstand sector. Second key word is Wende. Wende translate the turnaround. Germany had over the last 70 years, you can say 4 big Wendes or turnarounds. The build-up after the war. Secondly, the unification in '89. The agenda, the Schröder Agenda 2010, over 10 years ago. And then obviously now, just for the last few years, the Energiewende, the energy turnaround. So you can call Germany as a laboratory for renewal, and we believe it is a key characteristic in the makeup of the German economy. Second point, the long-term consensus is crucial and helps to drive political stability and an inclusive political climate. They go far beyond the legislative periods, and governments across the party lines are supporting those agendas like Agenda 2010. Third point, Handwerk, craftsmanship. Very typical for the German employee system. The educational system is broad. It goes from academic to vocational, and really the craftsmanship training is essential in the communities, in the companies, in Mittelstand companies to drive innovation and growth. So this is our assessment of the German model. Overall, we strongly believe that the EU and the Euro are essential for the stability and the freedom of Germany. Let me move on to the recommendations to how we might build this on a broader scale. And the key, I would say the key theme, which we debated quite a bit, is really that building a culture of consensus was crucial in Europe, was crucial in Germany, is crucial, and we believe would also be crucial for Europe or for other countries who might be interested. And when I say consensus, I mean local communities, social partners like unions, politics, but also the economy. First thing, as a first recommendation, I think to accept change is crucial. And Germany, through the last 70 years, had to do this multiple times. Accept change and create long-term policies, which will not be changed if new parties are taking over in government. Secondly, ongoing promotion of entrepreneurship and Mittelstand companies or SMEs. We recommend, we think we could help, or a lot of other could benefit if entrepreneurship and SMEs would have more support. Point 3, we also should promote the education on all levels. As I said, craftsmanship, engineering, academic, to tackle youth unemployment across parts of the EU. And last but not least, to diversify the economy. So those are our thoughts, our recommendation. Is there any additional thought from the team here? Okay, that's the voice of Frankfurt. Bob, back to you.
Thank you, Martin. Let me go to the UK now and raise a question. I'll ask the UK, and you are representing all of the country, those people in the room. Hugh, what do you think is going to happen? Will the UK vote to stay in, go out? Hard to be the financial services center if you exit Europe. What's the current mood in the room? And if you were to take the temperature of at least your business colleagues, what would they say?
You're asking me to call the referendum here, I see.
I do. Thank you.
We touched on this at the beginning of the discussion, and the insight that we got from Ernst & Young and their research suggested that actually business is almost as divided as the population on this particular issue, largely on the basis that the UK as an attractive destination for international business investment isn't largely impacted by being a member or not being a member of the EU. It's impacted by other elements such as proximity to the marketplace and by the fact that its employment laws and other aspects are a little more liberalized. So actually, whereas business wants to make sure that it can continue to access European markets, it is very much less clear-cut whether the UK being part of the EU is important to that. I think in general, these sort of issues become highly polarized, and in the lead up to a referendum become very interesting for everybody. But when push comes to shove, when actually being forced to make a decision and to make a decision that will mean such a large amount of structural change, my suspicion is that Britain will vote to stay as part of the EU.
Hugh, we've recorded that message, and we will hold you personally accountable and see what happens.
There are some lawyers in the room here. I'm hoping that I'm suitably hedged on that opinion.
Thank you. I'm going to move now to France. France is making lots of headlines at the moment, very visible in the press. And the issue that keeps coming back around France is flexibility of the labor force. You raised that during your discussion. Do you think we're going to see any change in flexibility in the next 12 to 18 months in the labor force flexibility in France, or are we going to continue to have a polarized economy where there's a constant battle between the corporate view and the labor force? Paris, over to you.
Yes, for us, sorry, we had a very huge negotiation between unions and the government and the CEO of the union also to conclude to more flexibility in our labor regulation, and we hope it's a very good change in the right sense. So our hope today in France is if the government will apply the next what he's saying today, if this message of the French government, first government, are really applied in the future, we can expect perhaps an improvement in our flexibility in our labor rules, which is effectively very important for our future and for our attractiveness.
Thank you, France. Let's move to Italy. We talk quite a bit in Italy about creativity in the luxury goods area. I'm just wondering whether you think that creativity can be exported to other countries. We talked about it being largely around investing in people. Do you think there's enough investment in people in Italy? And if not, do you think in the short term we're going to see some increased government spending to get youth to both be more mobile and to focus on the creative sectors? Milan, you could come off mute.
Yes, we wish that this will happen, but at this point of time, our government, with its kind of temporary government, as you well know, I think they have a priority more in terms of tax reform, more in terms of other elements. I think the education is something that will come afterward, but definitely the only area that we pointed out that will be definitely on the agenda of the government is the youth unemployment. That will definitely be an area where they will focus a lot. But in terms of investing in education, I think is not on the top priority of the agenda, but will come afterward because it's really necessary. And as you know, one of the points will be to attract in the Italian university of this center of excellence for creativity people from around the world, which is already happening. Like 50% of the people that are at the design school in Milano are coming from abroad, but there is no support from the government. So this should be improved, but we do not think that will be one of the actions that will be taken in place in the next, let's say, 18-12 months.
Thank you, Milan. Warsaw, you mentioned during your debriefing that there were a number of issues that you had in terms of customs and particularly on the eastern border. Can you elaborate on that, please, for me? Warsaw, you need to come off mute, please. Warsaw, we can't hear you. We still can't hear you, Warsaw. One second, Warsaw. You can hear me. You have this look of surprise. Why can't we? Yeah, now we can hear you, Warsaw. Thank you. Warsaw, we lost you again. Warsaw. Let's try that again.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
We hear you wonderfully. Thank you.
Border crossings between Poland and to the east, and we see significant problems at these border crossings in the transfer of goods. There are long delays, sometimes 2 to 3 days in length, This creates complications for the drivers in terms of resting times and impacting their efficiency. So, and it also means impact for business. Consumers may not be able to have access to products, or companies have to invest more into working capital to support these kind of delays, all of which the consumer ends up paying for. We'd like to see efforts to improve the efficiency of customs controls. We think they're urgently needed, whether it's more crossings or electronic pre-clearance, green lanes for pre-cleared traffic, real-time updates on waiting times, or allocated time slots for crossings. We can also think of professional visas for drivers, all in the spirit of improving the quality of the cross-border movement and significantly reducing the amount of time. So we feel that an emphasis should be made on legislation to eliminate these inefficiencies rather than legislating around these inefficiencies. So again, if you look, we move product in Poland to the east. I'll share one example. We move it to Kazakhstan. That product may take 3 weeks to arrive, even using rail and intermodal. Half the time that product is waiting somewhere for information to be transferred, and the longest waiting time is at the border. So that's what we see.
Great, thank you, Warsaw. Let me turn to Frankfurt, to Martin. Martin, you talked about vocational training as being one of the key areas that both requires further investment, but has also been one of the keys of success in Germany. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more?
Well, it goes back to the local communities where the Mittelstand and SMEs are located. They are usually working, with the local workforce and enable young people in the community to take on a craftsmanship and apprenticeship. And that's the first bond you can say they create with a future workforce. And quite often, Mittelstand companies are then sending those young people after the apprenticeship to other schools, to higher schools, in schools. And guess what? Those people come back usually to their communities as they are so appreciative of the early support in their lives. So very important to cover that in this region. And we believe everywhere to tackle youth unemployment. Important in the German economic space and part of the overall consensus culture.
Great.
Any other comments from this team?
Thank you, Martin. Just to let you know, you are live on video as well here in Brussels. Let me go back for one last question to each of the countries. We'll put UK on the spot. Hugh, if you had one recommendation for us to give to the Commission tomorrow morning, you who've also decided the outcome of the referendum, we're going to give you the burden of answering the following question. What's the message to the Commission from the UK you'd like to give?
Clive, do you want to? This is without any consultation with the experts in the room, or assistance and help from. But I'm happy to give your question a go. I think if we're going to focus it down more narrowly on the financial services sector, which is the area that you've particularly asked us to look at, then we would say that introducing financial regulation on capping salaries and remuneration more widely is a level of interference in the functioning of the market that is not going to help business in the UK and in the EU, and is going to be more of a hindrance.
Nobody got up and left from the room, so I assume there's consensus. Hugh, thank you very much. Let's move to France. One recommendation from Paris. What's the message we should give the Commission tomorrow morning, France?
I think the most important things now for the time being is to reduce the unemployment and to create new jobs. To create new jobs, you need to create new offer. And to create new offer, you need to innovate. And my recommendation is not only to innovate in technology or in industry, you need to innovate also in non-technology and in services. And so the finance fund you have at European Commission to finance innovation need also go to non-technology and for sector to develop.
Thank you, Paris. I am looking for Milan. Do we have Milan? While we're looking for Milan, let's move to Frankfurt. Martin, one recommendation, please come off mute.
Milan is here.
Milan is here. Just Milan, come tell me what you think. Here you are. Thanks.
Yeah. I think we are creative, so we have two suggestions. The first one being focus on youth unemployment. This is really of paramount importance, and not only for the creativity, but also for the whole economy. The second one is related to what we said before, based on high quality standard, IP, trademark, something which is protecting what is made Italy, what is made of good quality. So one side, work on the youth unemployment to bring this new generation into the game, don't let them out. And the second one is to work on high standard, high quality trademarks who can support and really protect what is made of high quality in Italy and in Europe in general terms.
Thank you, Italy. Lastly, Martin, we'll turn to you. What's the recommendation we should bring to the Commission tomorrow morning?
Yeah, from Frankfurt, we would say create, please, an agenda, long-term agenda to promote SMEs, Mittelstands companies, to help them to get more use bureaucracy and the burdens they have. Make it easier to create new companies, especially for the young. That would be our voice.
Thank you, countries. We have a view from all the countries at the moment. Thank you, Microsoft, for providing the technology here in the cloud. Warsaw, we will come back to you now for another statement, please.
Okay. So thank you. Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. So looking ahead, the 2050 transport white paper promotes efficiency on all modes of transport, and then by definition will promote connectivity and intermodal. So this, we like the idea of the long-term look into the future. I think it's important that all countries look at that future the same way, because even today in the world we live in with the same regulations, countries are looking at them differently and interpreting them differently. And that is especially true with our neighbors. The more we can bring our neighbors into that vision, the better we will all benefit. So that's from Warsaw. Thank you.
Thank you, Warsaw. So we've got a view from the UK. We got a view from France, Italy, Poland, and Germany, ladies and gentlemen. This is, the morning session is nearly complete. Let me turn over the floor now to David Earnshaw, who's the CEO of Burson Marsteller Brussels, who will introduce our next video. David?
Does this work? It's on? Hello? Okay, I think that works. Can everybody hear me? Okay, I don't intend to speak for very long. Our next speaker, Dalia Grybauskaitė, is far more important to listen to. And we've all been here for a very long morning, and I'm aware that I'm concluding this morning's session. The President of Lithuania is about to take her country into its first presidency of the Council of Ministers. Lithuania takes its presidency at a critical time. I'm going to say more about next year later this afternoon when we get to the European Leader of the Year award. But the race is now on to get a mass of rules and law fundamental to the functioning of our single market through the Council of Ministers and through the European Parliament before next year's European elections. Lithuania, one of Europe's smallest states, has probably one of the biggest presidency jobs ever to do. Dalia Grybauskaitė would be with us today, but she's receiving the handover from the Irish Prime Minister, the current presidency country. In 6 months' time, she will hand over to the next presidency, Greece. 2014 will be a year of profound change for the European institutions. A new leadership team will be installed between May and December 2014. I will say more about that later this afternoon. Lithuania, over the next 6 months, has to lay the groundwork for what will be a turning point year for Europe. I'd like to make two more main points. 2 points about the other risks that we face, that Europe faces. First of all, in May 2014, we have the European elections. We need a good turnout for the sake of the legitimacy of the European project. Get your people to vote. Secondly, we've heard this morning about the British problem. You will recognise that I have the problem of being British. You need to stand up and be counted. Is there anybody, truthfully, really, in this room that would rather have a Europe without Britain, who thinks that Europe without Britain would be a better Europe or a better Britain? We, you, need to say so. Europe needs you, not vice versa. And on this one, let's not hedge. I think it's important for the business community to take on nationalism. Let me now move on to introduce Dalia Grybauskaitė. It's obviously an honour and a privilege to do that. She is an amazing woman. She has been a member of the Communist Party. She is of working class origins. Like Mrs. Thatcher, she is referred to as the Iron Lady. Margaret Thatcher is her role model, thankfully, along with Gandhi. She was a member of the European Commission, 2004 to 2009. And in 2005, she was named Commissioner of the Year. Today, Dalia Grybauskaitė is the President of Lithuania. In her declaration of candidacy, she spoke of her quest for truth, transparency, and responsibility, values we share here today. Upon taking office, she cut her salary in half. Today, she leads her country into its first presidency of the Council of Ministers, starting in 3 weeks' time. Ladies and gentlemen, I hand over to Dalia Grybauskaitė.
Could we dim the lights, please?
Dear business leaders, ladies and gentlemen, Lithuania will take over the presidency of the Council of the European Union on July 1st. We are embarking on this important task with confidence. Welcoming today's discussion on revitalizing the European dream, I would like to focus on our commitment to the common goal. The founding fathers of the European Union have left us with an inspiring vision to follow: peace and prosperity for our people. What we need now is political will to act. We have to focus on most urgent issues, showing full responsibility to take the decisions. That is what Lithuania aims at during the upcoming presidency. We encourage to focus Europe's attention on financial stability, growth, and openness. First, stability. You business people know better than anyone else that financial discipline matters. Sooner or later, bills must be paid, resources must be managed efficiently. The same is true for banks and governments. To have a favorable business environment for all of us, we need banks to be more responsible and governments to live within their means. During the economic crisis, Lithuania have enough courage to make fiscal consolidation as large as 12% of the GDP, without any rescue funds. Now we have a sustainable 3% growth and a balanced current account. Second, on growth. Economic recovery and jobs is the primary concern of our people. We have to unleash the potential of our internal market in goods and services, also in the energy sector. We have to find real solutions to youth unemployment and make sure that Europe is a place where young people find their jobs. Focusing on the real engines of our economies, industry, infrastructure, and new technologies, we can make Europe stronger. For this, European institutions have to reach an agreement and highlight the priority of innovations in the European budget, while businesses need to play their part as well. I encourage business people to increase presence in different regions of Europe and take advantage of extremely competitive, well-educated labor force, modern infrastructure, and unified laws and regulations. And last, Lithuania will invite members to focus on open Europe. It is obvious that closer trade relations and free trade agreements with strategic partners, the United States and Japan, can offer growth and new opportunities to our economies. It is also clear that close integration with neighboring countries in the East makes our democracy stronger and more secure. We should actively pursue both paths, turning Europe's relations with the world into an asset. Ladies and gentlemen, I have outlined the key priorities for the upcoming 6 months. If we want the European dream to come true, we need responsible decisions. Decisions that ensure financial stability and enable the growth of our economies, resulting in real jobs and prosperity for the people. I once again congratulate your initiative and invite the business community to take an active part in discussing and shaping our common future in Europe.
Thank you very much. This invitation to the business community to help shape policy going forward is clearly the sole and primary objective of this conference. And as you've heard from the various debate and discussion this morning, there definitely is a corporate view as to what needs to happen going forward. And in terms of recommendations, we will continue the debate and discussion this afternoon. I'd just like to close before lunch by thanking Microsoft and Skype in London for hosting the session in London, Ernst & Young in Paris, 3M in Milan, General Electric, GE in Frankfurt, and P&G in Warsaw. These are 5 companies who came to us and said they'd be willing to host this first ever virtual town hall. We have local executives who couldn't come to Brussels who attended those sessions. Clearly there is an opportunity to use this kind of virtual technology to link up, so to speak, the voice of the corporate view across Europe now and going forward. So again, I'd like to thank Microsoft in particular for providing this innovative technology to us. I would now like to invite you to lunch in the next room. We will continue the debate promptly at 2 p.m. today, so please, I'm giving you a few minutes extra now, so please be back exactly at 2 o'clock. We've got interesting panels across the afternoon. We've got a tight time schedule. Please enjoy your lunch, and thank you for your attention this morning. Can we have the video, please, of Mr. Gonzalez?
Me alegro de saludaros y lamento no poder estar en este debate que tanto me interesa y tanto me preocupa. Es muy difícil hoy tener una visión optimista sobre el futuro de la Unión Europea y, desgraciadamente, lo que necesitamos es lo contrario, tener un proyecto optimista sobre el futuro de Europa y tenerlo resolviendo los problemas de cómo enfrentar esta crisis que está cambiando la posición de Europa en el mundo rápidamente y no a mejor, y cómo resolver los problemas estructurales para que funcione Europa adecuadamente. Entonces, ¿qué me preocupa? Me preocupa que Europa no está respondiendo a la crisis adecuadamente, no está respondiendo. Si ven con lo que está pasando en el mundo, los países emergentes están creciendo, están tirando del Producto Bruto Mundial. Estados Unidos está en un proceso muy interesante que no solo le da crecimiento, aunque no sea un crecimiento espectacular, sino que le está permitiendo algo importantísimo, es reindustrializar Estados Unidos. Reindustrializar no quiere decir volver a la vieja industria, que ya se deslocalizó, sino algo mucho más inteligente. Y es a base del esfuerzo de innovación, introducir en todo el aparato productivo, desde los servicios a la industria clásica, a la producción de automóviles, todas las tecnologías nuevas que añadan valor y permitan competir en una economía global, en una economía abierta que no tiene marcha atrás. Europa tiene que hacer un esfuerzo de reindustrialización, de inversión, de proyectos que tiren de la demanda, que alivien el drama y el fracaso económico que supone el desempleo y, por tanto, engancharse a una tasa de crecimiento razonable. El propio Japón lo está intentando, solo queda Europa atrás. ¿Cuál es la razón de fondo de por qué nos interesa no solo un proyecto europeo, sino más Europa cada vez? Porque cada país de Europa, incluido Alemania, que es la gran potencia económica de Europa, por sí solo no tiene significación en la economía global. Incluso las empresas europeas, las grandes empresas europeas, necesitan redimensionarse para competir en la economía global y ganar competitividad. Por tanto, Europa tiene toda una reforma estructural que hacer, un impulso económico que no puede venir de los presupuestos nacionales, que tiene que activar el Banco Europeo de Inversiones y el Fondo Europeo de Inversiones, que tiene dinero, tiene capacidad, ese dinero además está a precios competitivos, por tanto, a tasas de interés competitivas, para animar todos los grandes proyectos europeos. Pero no hay que perder tiempo, eso es urgente ya. Yo no les estoy hablando solo del día de mañana, pero la condición para que ganemos el futuro de Europa es más Unión Europea. Es absurdo que se siga pensando que la unión monetaria va a funcionar sin unión bancaria, sin unión económico y fiscal, sin convergencia de todas las políticas, pero necesitamos más Europa todos y cada uno de los estados nacionales. Eso es lo único que frenaría este proceso de creciente nacionalismo que puede volver a destruir el gran proyecto, el gran sueño europeo. Hoy necesitamos más que nunca una verdadera construcción europea con una federalización de las políticas económicas para acompañar a las políticas monetarias y una atención, sobre todo, una atención inmediata al desastre económico que supone la pérdida de capital humano en términos de paro de los jóvenes en Europa. Les hablo desde España, la más castigada por el problema del desempleo, pero lo hago extensible a toda Europa. Lo necesitamos con urgencia, Cada país solo no podrá, juntos podremos representar un buen papel con el modelo europeo que tiene que combinar alto nivel de excelencia y competitividad con políticas de cohesión social que nos dan nuestra identidad. Gracias.
We will pass back your applause to Felipe. I think that sets the context for the afternoon debate. Can I ask my panelists, please, to come up to the table, and I'm going to turn to Javier, to Parola, and Bruno to give an introduction to the INSEAD booze study. Gentlemen, over to you. Yeah.
Thank you, Bob. On behalf of INSEAD and Booz & Company, we want to thank the State of the European Union for giving us a chance to present again our report. This is the third time that we present this in this auditorium. A brief background about INSEAD. We were founded about 50 years ago, 3 months after the Treaty of Rome, as the first business school with a truly European vocation. As you know, many of business leaders in Europe were trained by us, and we have a vocation for having an international and multicultural approach. But we have a very strong European roots. Today, we are a global business school. We call ourselves a business school for the world, but we are still committed to our European roots by participating in this event. Last October, INSEAD announced the launching of the European Competitiveness Initiative. This is our way for us to maintain our relevance and our voice in this debate. Bruno Lanvin is the executive director. I am the academic director. And together with us, there are 25 faculty members from all of the different areas, all of them committed to engaging in research, pedagogical activities, to understand the issues about competitiveness in Europe, as well as to help improve the situation. I just want to take the opportunity to invite all of you who will be in Paris on June the 28th for another conference that we are organizing, the Global Business Leaders Conference, in which we will continue the conversation about European competitiveness by organizing panels about multinationals, medium-sized companies, and entrepreneurship. I would like to introduce briefly the methodology for the study, which is similar to the one that we used in the previous reports. We ran a survey based on a sample of INSEAD alumni, participants from our executive education programs, and clients and contacts of Booz & Company. Therefore, this report provides the corporate perspective, which is at the spirit of the state of the EU. We had some questions that were similar or the same as the ones that we had in previous versions in order to allow us to compare the trends from year to year. But we also introduced some questions that were new in order to take the pulse about the important issues that the business considered today. The survey was delivered on March 2013. So if you remember, that was the time where Cyprus was having some problems. There were 1,500 respondents, and they represent all countries and all sectors. Now, when we analyzed the survey, we did the aggregate analysis, but also we did a segmentation by country, by sector, and by demographic characteristics of the respondents. And all of the report and all of the information that we will be discussing today is representative across countries and across sectors unless we indicate to the contrary. Now I will pass to Bruno.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Javier. I would like to insist on 2 elements that make this study unique. The first one is that we started this effort with the creation of this event. So this is the 3rd edition. And in the process, we've seen 2 things. On one hand, we've seen a growing Collaboration, I'm trying to find a warmer word than collaboration with Boo's team, with the EEC. You saw that Bob Gogol, who is not at this end of the room, is also listed as one of the co-authors of the report. And we've seen a team spirit grow. We saw that our enthusiasm for it was being shared. And we've seen also the mood of the respondents, the business community, also changing and consolidating. A key message that was there already 3 years ago was repeated last year and is repeated in this study, is that the business community believes in Europe. Not only they believe in Europe, they believe that a healthy Europe, a competitive Europe, is a crucial element for world stability, for world growth, and just for the planet as a whole. And it's a message we hear from our respondents, whether they're operating in Europe, whether they're living in Europe, or whether they're outside of Europe. Some of them are even trying to get into this conversation, and we welcome them. The second reason why this study is unique is because it is not a view of the corporate sector for the sake of having a view from the corporate sector. When we send a questionnaire to the alumni of INSEAD and to the clients of Booz, we actually reach out to 40,000 plus, between 40,000 and 45,000 people. When we get
Attention. Test des installations. Veuillez continuer de travailler dans le calme. Vous ne devez pas évacuer le bâtiment. Aandacht. Gelieverd gebouw niet te verlaten. Blijf rustig doorwerken. Attention. Test des installations. Veuillez continuer de travailler dans le calme. Vous ne devez pas évacuer le bâtiment. Aandacht. Test alarm. Gelieverd gebouw niet te verlaten.
Thank you. And we are very fortunate that we are not in the UN. We would get it in 6 languages. So coming back and finishing on the uniqueness of the report, when we get this 1,500 responses, we get it from people who actually invest quality time. Answering a survey like this one takes about 45 minutes. This is what our respondents tell us. So these are very busy, high-level executive, and in spite of that, they decide that Europe is sufficiently important for them to invest quality time in responding. And very often they go beyond responding. They gave us pages of comments saying how much they hate this question, how much that is relevant, how it can be improved next year. So it's a real investment, and we're very grateful for that. As I said, it's not just a collection of opinions. This is an action-oriented report. That is, every single one of the responses we get has some link with an action to be taken by somebody. It's not about pushing the action to European institutions or to national governments. It's actions on which business and public authorities and academia and civil society can be engaged together. So this is why we continue to be as enthusiastic as we've been 3 years ago when we started it, and we are grateful for this event to allow us to actually continue to produce this report. We have a message of hope, we have a message of relevance, and we have a message of action.
So in our work as consultants, we have the great opportunity of meeting clients and business leaders all across Europe in any shape and form. And there are 3 things that have struck us in the discussions we've had over the last few years. Firstly, business leaders are not so worried about themselves. The crisis that hit 5 years ago is one they've lived through. They've adapted to it. They recognize that uncertainty is here to stay. And they've found ways of making themselves more resilient to manage disruption as it happens. Instead, what they're worried about is Europe and the society they live in. Because they recognize that for them to be successful over time, for their businesses to be successful over time, so must the society they live in. The second thing we've heard from business leaders is that they need to and want to be an integral part of the solution. Europe needs jobs, Europe needs growth. And this has to come from new and existing businesses in the private sector. There's no doubt that corporate leaders are ready to lend a hand to help solve Europe's problems. The third thing we've heard is that business leaders are growing increasingly frustrated with not having enough voice in the debate. Far too often, it is positioned as business interest versus public interest. And it is not positioned as a joint effort to solve common problems. Now, when we heard about this opportunity, or actually debated it amongst ourselves 3 years ago to try to find a way of surveying business leaders, we were really excited about that opportunity. We do think that this survey and the outcome from it and the conference here is one avenue for making the voice of business heard. Now, before we move on, just one more thing. It's very clear that business leaders have taken a lot of action over the last few years to become resilient so they can weather future storms. What is also clear from the survey is that they are increasingly concerned about the competitiveness of Europe. They're increasingly concerned about the need to take concerted action now. Impatience is clearly growing. And so hopefully we can use the debate this afternoon to discuss some options and come up with some concrete ideas for what we can do going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Javier, can you come down and let's get the first PowerPoint slide up. Not? Okay, we'll do this. Just to keep everybody, well, okay, we'll go back to these slides. Thank you. Javier, this is your show. Can we get the slide clicker, but let's push to the next slide if we can.
Okay. So we will present briefly some highlights of the report, particularly focusing on those questions related to the economic state of the Union. Some of the questions try to take a pulse of the situation this year compared to 2012. 2012 was the middle of the Grexit discussion, the middle of the monetary policy and the banking crisis. So we were interested to see whether the views had improved since then or how did they compare. Now, what we found in terms of the overall feelings relative to the European project, we found that our respondents were slightly less optimistic about the situation in the short term. So 71% expressed either worry or concern about the situation compared to 52% last year. So clearly there is a signal of impatience and urgency that something needs to be done quickly if this trend is not to become another crisis. At the same time, we were also surprised by the results on the question about the long-term views of the European Union. When we asked our participants their view of the long-term position of EU in the world, 72% of them expressed that the EU would have a major power position compared to 54% last year. So what we are hearing is a positive response about the long-term potential in Europe based on the fundamentals, maybe based on the fact that over the last year other economic areas have been going through troubles themselves, and maybe with the hope that the EU will be able to manage action and surmount some of the current problems. At the same time, there is clearly a sense of impatience and a call for action for the EU and national governments to improve the situation. Now, these results that we are presenting here were consistent across all sectors and all countries and emphasize the need to do something now. Next slide.
Next slide, please.
So, what is it to be done? We asked in the survey several questions about diagnosis of the problem and what to do. There was disagreement about many areas. For example, about 50% of our respondents thought that the recent European Council budget of austerity was a good thing for Europe, but other many people thought that it was a bad thing for Europe. There was one thing that came across very clearly with an overwhelming consensus about the diagnosis and also the path for action in Europe, and that is the theme of competitiveness and productivity. 82% of our respondents, so 4 out of 5, believe that there is an increasing gap